trying to mentally prepare. I try to mentally prepare for the future a lot. And, it's not even helpful.
Actually, it's not. And yet, look how much of our society is based upon planning for the future.
Yeah.
I mean, all wars start because of planning for the future. Wars don't start spontaneously, they build up. Okay? That, in fact, one of the most important ways that we talk about in that way is building up the future, um, is based upon getting ready for disasters to happen that don't normally happen. But since we're all prepared for a disaster and we want to check out our disaster equipment, let's go ahead and have a disaster anyway.
Hmm. Yeah. I
Okay?
mean, yeah, it's very incessant, not incessant because I wake up to it a lot, but it's, as soon as I wake up to it, I get out of it and I go back into it, like anywhere from 5 seconds to 10 minutes later. Planning, like I have a conversation in my head that I'm going to have in the future, preemptively in my head. It makes it very difficult to focus on the present or be present.
Exactly so. But now you're beginning to tell the difference between being in the present moment and being stuck in planning.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there is a certain amount of planning that needs to be done, but surprise, surprise, that's far less than the actual planning that's needed is far less than the planning that we do. That in fact, we could say that much of the planning that is useful, valuable, and wholesome requires a certain amount of knowledge about what needs to be done. And if you have the knowledge about what needs to be done and how to do it, then planning is easy.
Mm-hmm.
The problems is contingencies, or a better word for it is whataboutism. What about this and what about that?
Yeah, what if
Right?
this, like I keep doing, like, well, if what if X happens, then I'll do Y. Or but if Z happens, I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Lots of that.
Precisely. Right. Okay. And guess what? What if Z happens? I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That kind of thought will happen in the mind over and over and over and over again. What if X happens? And then you'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but the items on the list change. Even the count changes. And when we recognize, oh, this is just mental um, mathematics or arithmetic that we don't need, when we in fact don't have to plan for things so much. But our society has taught from childhood that the kids have to plan for emergencies that don't really ever happen. Okay. Um, that the world is probably far more secure than. Let's give an example of the shooting in, I think it's Uvalde, Texas, that happened about 6 weeks ago or something like that. And now they're all screaming about, well, the doors weren't locked, and the people weren't prepared, and the cops didn't go in, and all of that kind of stuff. Because that mentality is trying to say, well, what if happens? And then they'll make rules, doors should be locked, and the doors are not going to stay locked. We've even had politicians say that, oh, that every school should have only one door. And kids are not going to obey by that. If you put in a really, really big school only one door for the kids to go out, there'll be kids going out of the windows instead.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't plan on that kind of stuff. So I'm using that kind of an example is that if they really wanted to plan for it, then they would plan on making the kids in the school happy and productive. And it turns out that something happened in the fourth grade this kid was in when he was in the fourth grade, and he waited something like 10 or 12 years, and then he took it out on them, right? And so if we had better planned our schools, not planning in the sense of getting prepared for gunmen, but getting prepared for the government when the gunman is still in the fourth grade. In other words, the nowness of the incident that caused him to kill people years later was all boiling in his mind over a long period of time. He built himself up to it. And then he did it. Okay? And he did it based upon the fact that he was mistreated one time. And if the teacher in that day had been a better teacher, she could have all of those years later prevented 21 people getting killed. But that would have been in the moment, to done one thing right then, the right thing to do at that one moment, because all of the planning that the town didn't work. They had 376 cops at that school, waiting around, not knowing what to do while that active shooter was there. So what good did their plans do?
Right. And I can tell.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the same with my mental pre-preparation, because not only can I not predict everything, but it also just distracts me from what I can do in the actual moment.
That's exactly what I'm getting at. Precisely so. Yes. And so now you can kind of be on guard to the planning of the future. So an example of that would be, oh, I will have to go get the 90-day visa done. That's about the only item that I have on my calendar. That's about the only item. But it's on the calendar, which means it's on the mind. And every time that I think about the visa now, I say, well, we'll be ready for it when it's time. And then I can just drop it. Because I know that there's nothing to do now.
Right.
And in fact, some of the stuff that needs to be done has to be timely. In other words, I can't go take a physical exam now and then give that exam to the immigration people 6 months from now. They want it within 6 days. So there's no reason to do any planning at all. In fact, I have talked to you more about the visa right now than I ever think about it.
Well, I would that I'm jealous, because I pre-plan the future so much. And I guess I want the thoughts not to be coming back anymore. Like, stop it, thoughts.
Well, then when the thoughts come in, you can just chase them out. Imagine that you are, for a moment at least, imagine that you're living in a cartoon kind of paradise. Maybe that you're in the role of Snow White, and that the forest cottage that she lives in is full of animals. And yet she has songs like Whistle While She Works, and she's got all of these friends around. But she could have the mentality of a rule saying, no animals in the house. But a lot of people have that kind of rule. And if you have that kind of rule, then you're giving yourself a lot of work. If you make the rule no animals in the house, then that is up to you then to become the police of animals in the house. And so now you have to start planning what traps you're going to set and all of that kind of stuff. And so there's some basic rules that we have. And so just imagine again that you're back into that forest cottage where it's okay for the animals to come in because they're all friends.
Okay.
And if you could begin to see that your life is living the life in a beautiful cottage with lots of animals around, and these animals are your friends, and start having that imagery. Allow yourself to imagine that on a regular basis, saying all the animals that come into the house are welcome. They're friends. And now you can begin to see that anything that comes into your life can be a friend. It can be welcomed. That we don't have to set rules about what's allowed and what's not allowed. Because that's what a lot of your planning is trying to plan for preventing things that should not happen. All right? Well, right, yeah, those things should not happen. And when you come around to the point of, well, they're probably not going to happen anyway, so why should I worry about it?
Yeah, they're probably not going to happen anyways. And even if they do, they're things that have to be dealt with when they come up.
Right. And you won't be able to get prepared. It doesn't matter how many traps you set, you're going to need a trap that you don't have someday.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, so then so sometimes I get caught in these frustration loops where, since I know all of that, I think, oh, you shouldn't be here. Thoughts about the future. Why do you keep coming back? Then I get frustrated.
Even that, though, is now one of the animals that you're going to start allowing in your house.
Okay, yeah.
Because he's only going to stay there if you try to trap him.
Yeah.
Otherwise, those thoughts are just going to come and go. And you could just keep coming back to everything's all right, everything is fine. That the reason that you're trying to control things is because of the dangers, which means that you're still coming from the victim's position. And I'm not saying that to fuss at you, but rather to point out that everybody's in that position. Your average winner is few and far between, and almost everyone that you meet is coming from the victim's position of not being in control of their lives, but in fact having to constantly plan for all the dangerous things that could happen that never do.
See, even when you said that, like, my mind jumped to the future like 3 times while you were talking.
But they jumped back.
Yeah.
And they didn't jump back with an intermediate thoughts of, you should not have thoughts of the future.
Yeah, that's true.
Those are the thoughts that we're beginning to look at. Is not that you can see what the mind is doing; it's your reaction to what the mind is doing.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, because that reaction time of what the mind is doing, is the time that we have to take the right effort. The right effort after you recognize that thought's unwholesome. That's the time to actually remove it, rather than ruminating about it. Thou shalt not have that kind of thought.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which now you're a victim to it.
True. Yeah, exactly.
And you're a victim to the rule, thou shalt not have that thought.
Yeah.
And so you're victimized 2 ways. And the champion way of doing it is just, never mind. That stuff is not important. Yeah. Nothing is important. Name me something that's actually important.
Everything.
No, name me something that is actually important.
My trauma recovery?
No, you could be dead tomorrow, and then who cares a squat about your...
That I have a home?
Homes are easy enough to come by. How many different homes have you had?
A bunch, but there's a bunch of homeless people too. So it's obvious that you can be homeless.
Well, it's possible to be homeless, and the general point about it is that most of the people who are homeless are actually quite unhappy people. They were unhappy before they became homeless, and then they're just more unhappy when they've lost their home.
Yeah. Well,
but the fact is that you do have a home.
Yeah. For now.
So even if you, well, just listen, even if you were homeless, then what's important?
Food.
Okay. Whether you've got food or not, your mental state. In other words, I'm getting around to eventually your mental state is the most important thing, other than the most important thing of all. Most important thing of all is that you're still breathing. You're still alive.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're dead, what's important?
Right.
Okay. If you are still alive, then you've done everything that's important. And that every one of us lives with a death sentence hanging over our head that you were going to be dead in 5 minutes. And the only reprieve, the only way out of that is to take another breath. Right? So breathing winds up being kind of important, because without breathing, you don't stay alive. You talked about housing. You could go without housing. People go without housing for a long time. You go 30 days without food. This puppy can't go for 2 minutes without a kiss. But the point that we're making is that the breathing and being alive is the only thing that's important.
Okay.
Okay? If you can get that, then you can recognize that you've already got everything that's important. And all you have to do is to keep it is by just taking another breath.
Mm-hmm.
And you get the beauty of that, that the only really thing that's really important is not any of the stuff that your parents thought were important. None of the stuff that your society says is important. The only thing that's important is this next breath. And yet, because we're so wrapped up in all of the stuff that we thought was important that's not, we fail to take care of the stuff that really is important. Okay. Now, the reason why breathing is important is because breathing is going to keep you alive. I mean, if you were dead, then breathing wouldn't be very important now, would it?
Right.
I mean, there are corpses that some people keep putting those machines on, keeping them breathing, where in fact they're already dead. So the breathing machine didn't help them to talk. So ultimately, then, it's not the breathing, it's the fact that you're still alive. You're alive, Tessa. Can you get a load of that? Just the fact that you're alive. I mean, that big stuffed couch chair behind you is a nice chair, but it doesn't know it because it's not alive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? If you can recognize that life itself is the only thing that is important to you, then why are you going around paying attention to all of this other stuff that's not important? When you thought, in fact, that they were important.
Yeah, I often get caught up in thinking they're important. And then, like, sometimes I recognize, I'm getting too caught up in it. But yeah. But then it just keeps repeating. So I'm just on this cycle of toggling back and forth between, being present and thinking about the past or future.
Mm-hmm. And yet the past is already gone. There's nothing that you can do about the past.
Yeah.
Nothing that you can do about it. So it couldn't possibly be very important at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
It couldn't possibly be important. What's important is being alive. Staying alive. That's the only thing that's important. All right. If staying alive is the only thing that's important, then we are actually ignorantly making other things important and not thinking about that, rather than actually thinking about and paying attention to and appreciating being alive. And being in the present moment is a process of being alive. That the past is dead and the future is not yet to be. It's unborn. It's unknown. The only real thing that's really important is this moment, right here, right now, being alive and knowing that you're alive.
Sometimes I wonder if everybody, though, struggles or has my experience with my mind being so busy, because it's really constantly thinking, not constantly, but a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well,
I mean, do
that's part
other
of the
people,
training.
is this their
That's
experience?
that's part of the training of our society. You were trained that way by people who did that. You probably heard this as kind of an example, and I'll use the frame island life. Have you ever heard the phrase island life? That people who live on islands are already far away from all of the big parts of the world.
Huh?
And because of that, they're remote. And so the only thing that islanders think about are the things that are on their island, like the hills to climb, coconuts to pick, the fish to catch, the sea to swim in. You get what I'm pointing at? Okay, so this is one of the reasons why islands are tourist destinations, so that people can get away from all of the problems of the world. Now, the point that I'm making is you ask the question, does everybody have their mind all tied up in important things that they've been taught? The answer to that is no. Generally, islanders don't. They can actually enjoy being on the island. But a whole lot of Westerners will come to an island to enjoy themselves, to have a holiday, and they wind up doing a lot of activities because their mind is really active. And so they'll go ride elephants, and they'll go to boxing matches, and they'll go to all kinds of things that the locals don't bother with. Okay, so not everyone is like that. That there are individual differences, and in fact, in some societies, they're even worse in some regards. One of the things that may be valuable for you on this regard is to recognize that basically there are two different societies in the world. There's more than that, but basically there's two societies. There is the honor system society and the guilt system society. And because of Christianity and the Catholic Church, Europe and now the Americas are in a guilt system. Okay, that if you're insulted, you feel guilty.
Mm-hmm.
But in an honor society, which is more of an Islamic society, but Islam is not the only one. And in fact, Asia is also an honor society. It has to do with saving face and that kind of thing. So whenever anything happens, people who live in a guilt society will feel one way, and people who live in an honor society will think and feel differently than that. Okay, that in fact, one of the problems with the honor society is that people get killed a lot for honorable reasons. that in a guilt society would never happen. Now, I'm not saying that the guilt society is better than the honor society, that in fact, both of those societies have tremendous troubles. So, saving face is a really, really big issue in Asia. Being in the family's honor. So, if a girl gets messed up, she could get killed in the Islamic society because of the honor of the family has been besmirched. To where in the West, if the girl does something, then the family feels guilty and tries to hide her away, rather than a big public execution that would happen in an honor society. In the guilt society, they try to hide her away, send her to a special hospital or something like that. Okay, so if you understand that, then you can immediately begin to stop thinking about everybody, because we have two different societies and people behave in those societies completely differently. That's part of the reason why I think it was Horace Greeley who said, "East is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet." I'm one of the very few exceptions to that rule. That most people who go, say, live in Japan, they never really understand Japan. There have been people who, Westerners who live in Thailand, who know the language much better than I do, but they don't understand the culture they're in at all. I know one guy in particular, I met him about 35 years ago. He had a school. He was a teacher. He had English as a second language. He had a master's degree in that. And he specialized in Bangkok in Japanese. And so that's where I became to understand that this guy who was living in Bangkok had a school of Westerners teaching English, and many of the students were Japanese. And yet this guy did not understand anything except how to teach English. He did not understand the Thai culture at all. He did not understand the Japanese culture at all. That happens a lot, that people can live in a society, and because they're still thinking the way that they used to, they can't really figure out things. And there's really, I could go on for hours and hours about the various aspects of Thai society that are different from Western society. One of the main differences is that Thailand has been a Buddhist culture for about 1,300 years. And we know for sure that actually there is World Heritage sites right here in this area where the Chetties date back to the 700 AD period of time. So Buddhism has been in Thailand for 1,300 years. I imagine that Buddhism will begin to have an effect upon Western mentality, but only if the real teachings of the Buddha arrive, rather than the Western Buddhism that has already arrived.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because Western Buddhism doesn't change that guilt mentality. Okay? That one thing that's interesting about the guilt system is that even though we feel guilty, everybody does that, so everybody else is to blame. That it's actually guilt and blame are mixed together. And so you feel guilty and you feel blamed, and you also feel like the best way to get out of that guilt and blame is by blaming it on something else. That's one of the qualities of the honor society that does have some value, and that is that people do take responsibility. Yeah, this is me. I'm responsible. I can't go around blaming other people, nor do I feel guilty about it. So the reason that I'm mentioning all of this is to make sure that you understand that not everybody is alike, that there are really big differences in societies. And then there's individual differences within the society, but the society that you live in is by and large fairly well messed up.
Yeah, because
will find a lot of people that are just like you.
Because
I have a
sometimes
lot of just like this.
because sometimes I feel like, because of my history, I don't actually have the same chance that other people have of finding inner peace and happiness and, removing the
They all
hindrances.
feel that way. That's a common feeling.
Yeah.
That each one of us kind of feels like that we're unique, rather than recognizing that we're all more or less the same.
Yeah.
At least within a society. The societies can be different. That in fact, have you ever heard of the word bushido?
No.
Bushido is a Japanese word, and it really does have to do with their honor system. Probably the biggest example of that in history is that there was a British general who recognized that the Japanese were amassing forces in Malaysia, and that Singapore didn't stand a chance against the invasion of the Japanese during World War II. And the British armadas were nowhere in sight. This British general decided to surrender his troops. And that was a major mistake. If they had fought and lost, then they would have had the appreciation of the Japanese, because the Japanese have this bushido. In other words, you've got to stand and fight. You cannot surrender. But the British surrendered. Because of that, tens of thousands, maybe about 50,000 altogether, and they were actually about half and half British and Australian. There was a lot of Australian troops that were stationed in Singapore. They were all taken to Thailand and put to work, and they almost all starved to death because of the mistreatment of the Japanese, because the Japanese had absolutely no respect for these British, because their commander surrendered. They would have been much better off if they had defended Singapore to the last man. They would have lived longer, they would have been happier, they would have at least done something. But because they all surrendered, they all died. Why was that? Because the British general did not understand the Japanese culture. He thought that it would have been okay that he would be treated the way that the Europeans would have treated war criminals, or not war criminals, but POWs. So there's big cultural differences, and that was the case where just one man made one mistake that cost 50,000 lives because he didn't understand one Japanese word, bushido. And I was really impressed with this because I went through the museums and all in Singapore, and then later I went up to Kanchanaburi and saw what was going on in all the mass graves and everything up there. And so it's a very important point in history, especially for Thailand. But that's the point that I would like to make for you is that cultures are different. And that you live in a culture that is guilt-laden, and that you feel guilty about a lot of stuff. And that guilt is actually the same thing as the victim's position. That you feel guilty because you can't live up to all the rules that you have.
Yeah.
And so
well, I feel ashamed that I can't. Yeah.
So shame is something that you feel a lot, and you want to hide that. Right?
Well, yeah, I want to not feel it. That's for sure.
Okay. And so the way out of this is to begin to let all of this stuff be okay. You don't have to feel guilty. You don't have to feel ashamed because you're not living up to the standards of some rules that you picked up in childhood. that you can, as an adult, begin to set your own rules. And the best rules, in fact, the way that I teach it is that there is only one rule. We need to find a way of living our lives so that each one of us have only one rule. You know what that one rule is?
Breathe.
Well, dukkha-nirodha would be.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. But in fact, yes, that's true also, except that in some cases, breathing will get you killed. But if you go with dukkha-nirodha as your natural rule, then everything is going to be okay. Now, the reason I mention this is because in our society, with the guilt system built into it, there is always a big confusion about the cause and effect relationships, that we get that backwards sometimes. And so if we begin to straighten it out, that means that cause and effect is always immediate. This causes this immediately, but this does not cause that thing that happens 5 years from now. And yet we are taught that in our culture. Oh, if you don't do your homework now, you will have a miserable adulthood. I mean, this is the way that they teach our children.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so that issue of the cause and effect is broken. But when we have only one rule, then we can see the rule in the sense of the cause and effect. We can begin to see dukkha as dukkha so that we can avoid it right then and there. Now, when I say cause and effect, this mistaken idea of cause and effect, we use the language means and an end, the means to an end, right? And so we go around thinking about, is this the appropriate means to that end? In other words, world peace. The only way to bring about world peace is by destroying all the weapons that country has, maybe Russia or whatever. If we could have a war that depleted all of the war weapons, then we could have peace. All right. Another example. In World War II, there were medical doctors who performed all kinds of strange medical procedures on people just to see what the outcome would be.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, their means were messed up because they were looking for a particular end. And so do the means justify the end? In other words, if I do something terrible that brings about a good end, is the idea that, in fact, this is how politicians, all governments work that way. Let's go cause this problem, because if we cause this problem, it will create a good outcome later. Okay, here's a place where that works, and that is a fire break. That if you've got a raging fire going on, if you take and break, you take bulldozers and you cut a long strip out of the forest, then when the fire gets to that fire break, then only a few sparks are going to jump over to the next part, because all of this land has been bulldozed down and nothing will burn there. So this is a fire break. This is the kind of idea, and we get the idea then that we've got to go do that for everything. We got to go build those fire breaks. We got to go plan for the future. The point is though we in our minds go around building these fire breaks when there's no fire. We're just going through destroying a bunch of forest with the hope that our activities are going to be of some value, where in fact they're not.
Mm-hmm.
So within the teaching of the Buddha, this dukkha-nirodha means that everything is a means and every moment is an end. Or another way of saying it, that everything is a means and there is no end ever. It's just more means and more means and more means. In that regard, we have to start looking at the ethics of our actions right here, right now, never mind what the value of it's going to be later. Okay, we're always planning for the end goal or the end result. So the child will cheat on the test as a means to the end of getting a good grade. Right? Have you ever done that? Have you ever cheated on a test in order to get a good grade?
No.
No. That's very interesting, because when people do that, then what they will actually remember is the cheating, not the results. It's the means. So it's always the means, or always the actions that we're having right now. This is the important part about dukkha-nirodha as a rule, is the dukkha that we're avoiding is the dukkha right now, not the dukkha that we're doing now in order to prevent a bigger dukkha later.
What?
That's the, let me repeat that, okay? Doing a dukkha now, that this event of doing dukkha now, doing something harmful, unsatisfactory now, will then prevent a larger dukkha later. That's the whole concept of the means to an end. That we're going to go do something bad now, but that bad thing that we're doing now is going to prevent even a worse thing happening later.
Yeah.
Okay, so hence the doctors will do experiments on patients at Auschwitz. Even though they're killing people by doing it, at least they're getting some medical research done. Did you know that happened, by the way?
Yeah.
What I understand, one of those doctors is still alive in South America. He was very famous for doing very, very terrible research on people just to see what the effects would be. So if we understand that there are no means, there are no ends, there is only the means that we're taking in this present moment. And it's those means that have to be justified in and of themselves right here, right now, rather than saying, oh, well, if I do this now, it'll prevent that from happening later. Because we don't know what's going to happen later.
I thought there was an end, and it was to not have suffering.
Well, but the not having the suffering is right now.
Yeah. Okay.
To stop having the suffering right now. Get used to having no suffering right now, because we don't know what the future is going to be. That this is what I'm saying. This is an ordinary thought process. This means to an end idea, because the end is always way out into the future anyway. So building fire breaks may, in fact, in some cases be useful. But just going around building fire breaks is just going to destroy forests for no reason at all. So you're going around building fire breaks to prevent bad things from happening in the future. But the building of the fire break itself is dukkha. When we understand that, then we can say, okay, we need to stop thinking about the future and all the possible fires that can happen in the future. Because if I plan on all those possible fires, I'll create fires right here, right now, in order to stop those fires. So now we're saying we're not going to worry about the end result anymore. We're only going to be thinking about the means. Only what's happening right now is the only thing that matters. Just like being alive right now is the only thing that matters. Having this breath right now is the only thing that matters. So if being alive is the only thing that matters, wouldn't it be useful, valuable, and wholesome to enjoy the fact that you're alive right now? I mean, isn't it marvelous that you're still alive? You haven't crushed yourself to death.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're still alive.
Yeah.
And we can just relax. So having that thought, you're still alive. Enjoy the fact that you're still alive. How do we enjoy that we're still alive? Is by being in our senses. Not the thought sense, but in the eyes, the feelings, the kinesthetic, the proprioceptic, the touch, the taste, the hearing, the input that we receive from our natural environment. Whatever environment we're in, we absorb the data through our senses. And that proves that you're alive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so start spending more time, remembering to spend more time in being in the present moment, because that's the only time that you're going to recognize and appreciate that you're still alive, which is the only thing important. We start removing all of the unimportant stuff that we were told as kids were important. It's important to go to school. It's important to dress nice. It's important to have your hair done a certain way. It's important to go to church. There's no end to the importance at that low-level, ordinary place. But at the supermundane level, there's only one thing that is important, and that is staying alive. Being alive, that's the only thing, and you've got that. So congratulations, you're still alive.
Yeah, okay. Good job. Good job, me.
Right. And the past was not important. Whatever happened in the past was good enough, because here you are. You got through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah,
start appreciating being here. Start appreciating being alive. The means is all that we have. There is no end, and if there is an end, then you're dead, and then nothing matters at all. But while you're still alive, the only thing that matters is being alive. And so we begin to pay attention to being alive. It's just so marvelous to being alive. In the sense of thinking about something, thinking about the kinds of stuff that we think about when we're having a dream, like being lost, or trying to find our way through things, or looking for something, or whatever like that. So we get into doing that in our daydreams as well as in our night dreams. And when we're doing that, we're not actually appreciating being alive. And so we can wake up and, wait a minute, I don't have to worry about where that thing is, because I'm still alive right here, right now, without it. I don't need to go find that thing. I don't need to go find my way through this situation, because it's not real. It's an imagination. So this is something that you can begin to appreciate. It's just being alive right now means that you don't have to think about all the stuff that's not right here, right now. If it's not in the room that you're in, then it does not exist, really. It only exists when you go to it, and then it only exists in the here now. Okay, so the street that you live on right now does not exist for you. Only the room that you're in exists. But if you go and stand in the window and go and look at the road out there, then it's real, because you can see it. But if it's not real, you can't see it, then all it is an imagination. And while you and I are sitting here talking, a bulldozer could come by and wreck that street, and you wouldn't even know it. You still think it's real. Or some stray bomb from one of the Russian rockets could hit your street and blow up half the houses on the street, doing it silently, or you're not paying attention and you still think the street's there, and it's not there anymore. The only way you're going to know that is by going to the window and looking out and seeing that, hey, the street's gone.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's not worry about whether the street is there or not, because while you're sitting in the house, it doesn't matter whether the street gets blown up or not, because you're safe right here, right now.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the way to begin to say everything right here, right now is okay. I don't have to worry about the street. I don't have to worry about Ukraine. I don't have to worry about DC. I don't have to worry about cars. I don't have to worry about anything, because they're not in my reality right here, right now. But that's dukkha for me. And the dukkha-nirodha is to stop thinking about things that are not right here, right now. And the dukkha-nirodha is to begin to enjoy, I'm still alive. I still have senses. I can actually feel the touch of the air on the skin. You can feel the touch of the cloth on your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
You can feel the air when you breathe it. As you're breathing in, you can feel the touch of the air as it's coming into the nose.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what we're going to start paying attention to more and more, is what's happening right here, right now in our senses. This is what Ānāpānasati is really all about, is experiencing the body. And you cannot experience the body now the way that it was when you were a child. You cannot experience your body now the way that it will be when you're 75. You can only experience the body the way that it is right now. Another way that I say it is that we can only watch this breath, just this one. We can't watch a breath we had last month. It's gone.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't record it.
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot experience next month's breath. We can only experience this one. And so much of the teaching of the Buddha has to be about right here, right now, being in the present moment, because the present moment is generally safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The past for you is dangerous. The future obviously is dangerous because you only have a future that's based upon your past. And if your past is dangerous, your future is going to be dangerous. But right here, right now, you're safe. Isn't that marvelous? Right here, right now, you're safe, you're alive, you can breathe, and everything is hunky-dory. Everything is okay right now,
Yeah.
if we think about it like that. And so this is how we're beginning to think. We're beginning to think that right now is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right now is all right. Right now, I'm still alive. Right now, I'm still breathing. And this is already a whole lot better than what I was thinking a couple of minutes ago when I was lost or when I was looking for something. So whenever you feel lost or you're looking for something mentally, then in fact, if you look for something with your eyes, you can likely find it. If you look with it with your mind, maybe not. But the one thing that I have done is that when people get frantic looking for something, they're frantic and they're not paying close attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's two things that we can do. And one of the things that I would recommend is, do you remember seeing it? Because you can often remember where it was because of the last time that you saw it, if you were paying attention to it when you saw it. So this is part of the paying attention is that if we pay attention to something, then we'll probably more likely remember it right then and there than not. This is one of the good qualities of people who have good memories, is that they're actually paying attention to the here now when it happened and absorb that information. Where people who have poor memories are because they're thinking in memory and not paying attention to what's happening right here, right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a clear example of that is somebody they open their door and they set their keys down on the way to the toilet or on the way to answer the telephone, and now 10 minutes later they're looking for their keys.
Mm-hmm.
Why are they looking for the keys? Because they weren't mindful of when they set them down in the present moment of setting them down.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of the reasons why the Buddha recommends to practice watching what your hands are doing. Watching with your eyes what your hands are doing so that you'll remember where you set things down. And you don't have to go looking for them much anymore because you know where it is because you watched what you did with it in the first place. Another way of talking about this is that some people are more organized than others. Those that are organized are the ones who can remember to put things down. And another part of organization is to have a place for everything and then put everything in its place. Now, children don't know that. I remember that, in fact, that my organizational skills when I was a kid were quite poor. It was only after I became a computer scientist when I recognized that everything has to be organized because there's just too much data and too much programming to keep track of otherwise. So it's got to be organized. Well, guess what? Right now, my whole life is organized. When I put something down, that's its place. I only put things in its place, so I keep putting the same things back in the same place where it was. And that keeps us very organized, which means that now we don't have to remember very much because we keep intentionally in the present moment putting things where they belong rather than just absent-mindedly setting it down, because then it's going to get lost. We have to go looking for it rather than knowing exactly where it is. A good example of that would be the charger for your cell phone. Many people will leave the charger right where it is all the time, so they have to keep putting their cell phone where the charger is, and they know where their cell phone is because it's where the charger is. But then they'll lose the cell phone because when they weren't charging it, they just set it down someplace else, and now they've forgotten where they put it. But if you get the ability to think of, oh, I'm always going to set the cell phone down close to the charger because that's where it belongs, then that's where the cell phone will be whenever you go looking for it. You don't lose your stuff. Okay? So we're talking about right here, right now, paying attention to what we're doing. If we begin to pay attention right here, right now with what we're doing, then our lives become much, much easier because we don't lose stuff. We know where it is because we remember when we set it down because we were paying attention to it when we set it down, not thinking about something in the past or something in the future. And so paying attention to what we're doing in the present moment is a major part of this issue of dukkha-nirodha. If I pay attention to where I set stuff down, then later I won't have the dukkha of having to go look for it because I'll know exactly where it is. This is all part of the dukkha-nirodha practice that we're beginning to take on, is remember what causes dukkha. Not knowing where things are causes dukkha. Therefore, I'm going to start paying attention to what I'm doing in the present moment. Another one would be that, let us say that the cop stops you. You're out on the highway and the police stop. Well, if we have that one rule, dukkha-nirodha, then we're going to be very pleasant with the cop. We don't even see him as a cop. We just see him as a person. Hi, officer, glad to see you. But if we don't have that presence of mind, then what happens normally, because we were all kids at one time, we see cops as authorities, we see them as bullies, we see them as uptight, angry, hostile people. And so immediately the victim's position comes on, and I'm afraid. The cop comes up to the window of the car, and I'm all terrified. The cop is going to pick up on that terrified stuff. But if I'm not afraid of him, if I've got no dukkha, then I'm going to deal with the cop pleasantly, and he's going to have a pleasant experience. And cops don't normally have pleasant experiences like that. They normally have trauma. They're ready for it. They got their guns out. Okay? So if you apply dukkha-nirodha as your only rule, it will handle every case marvelously. And here you are carrying around 10,000 different rules that you can't keep, and you're feeling bad about them. So the first thing to do is when you recognize one of these rules is to just remember, oh, I've got a new rule now, dukkha-nirodha. I don't have to listen to any of the other rules. I can just have one rule that's going to, one size fits every situation. One size fits all. You don't have to worry about, oh, if I avoid dukkha now, then I will have to put up with a great big dukkha later. Is the mentality that we have. And the answer to that is no. If you can avoid dukkha right now and know how to do it and are skilled at doing it, then when that big dukkha comes, you can avoid it too. That your skill is in seeing dukkha and then stepping out of its way. So this is another way of talking about being here in the present moment. Always coming back to the right now. Because guess what? That's the only time that you can really appreciate being alive. Yeah, you're alive right now. Isn't that marvelous?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can breathe right now. No problems, no worries right now. And if you can go from this right now to the next right now in that state, and then from that right now to the next right now in that state, then you have a marvelous life. One happy moment after another happy moment. We don't have to ever plan much for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you've been planning, planning, planning for the future,
Yeah.
spending a lot of time planning for the future, much of which never happens.
Right. Yeah, most of which doesn't happen. And even if it does, it has to be dealt with then.
But it has to be dealt with in the present moment.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so getting skills at dealing with things in the present moment should be the skill set that we need to develop.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there is an organization called the Boy Scouts that I had a little bit to do with when I was a kid. I remember, in fact, that I was in sixth grade and in a town that they had the Boy Scouts. And that one of the things that I learned about the Boy Scouts was two things. One is the Boy Scout knife, which then became the Swiss Army knife. But the other one was the motto, be prepared. Now, what I had understood that was the way that the Boy Scouts understood it, and that is that you got to get a lot of stuff ready to be prepared for what happens, because we were quite materialistic. I came later from the teaching of the Buddha to understand that being prepared is not about getting stuff together, it's getting the mind together. So that if you have the mental skills that you need, then you can handle any situation. You can do the right thing at the right time always when you understand dukkha-nirodha, and you have the skill set to be able to see what is the right thing to do at this time to avoid the dukkha.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole teachings of the Buddha has to do with right here, right now. Guess what the Buddha called himself? You know, he didn't call himself Buddha.
No.
No, and then in fact, Buddha is a very, very kind of new word. Probably 500 years after the Buddha died was when they started calling him the Buddha. That in fact, 100 years after he died, he was known as Sakyamuni. But the question is that what did he call himself? How did he refer to himself?
I don't know.
He referred to himself as Tathāgatha. Tathāgatha. The word Tathāgatha means thusness, here-ness, the here now. And it's badly translated as Tathāgatha is the one who is here now, is translated as thus gone one. That's just so crazy. Thus gone one sounds like that here now is someplace else and he went there. So it's much better to say that it's someone who comes to this present moment from the past and from the future, where most people are living, is to come into the present moment. That's how important the Buddha thought that this present moment was. That's what he named himself. That's how important the here now is. Everything happens in the here, in the now. Everything that we experience happens right here, right now. And the best thing to experience right here, right now, is the fact that you're still alive. You're still able to experience the here now. Congratulations, you're still alive.
Yay.
Keep coming back to that over and over again. Keep remembering that the only thing that's important is that you're still alive and that you can experience being alive by experiencing through your senses what's happening right here and how marvelous that is. That's the part that I'm trying to get through to you, is how marvelous it is to be alive in this present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And you're agreeing with me intellectually, but you haven't really given yourself that experience yet.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I would recommend now for you is today and tomorrow, before you call me, is to start experiencing being in the present moment. Start seeing that all of the dukkha that ever hits you will hit you right here, right now, and all you have to do is to avoid it and to appreciate that you can avoid it and that you can
Okay.
be here and that you can be alive.
Okay.
Take a deep breath and just marvel at the fact that you're still alive.
Okay.
Go take a walk and just see all the aliveness on the grass and the trees and everything like that, that we live in a planet that's very much alive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the humans that are the least alive because they live in the dead past. And they
Mm-hmm.
live in a future that doesn't exist. Where in fact dogs and most of the animals and all the plants, they experience right here, right now. They're in the present moment.
Okay.
That's why they say the dogs have a Buddha nature, because they're able to stay in the present moment. Their mental past memory capabilities is so slight that they don't remember things that happened much. That in fact you can beat a dog in the morning and he'll be licking your face in the afternoon. If you beat a child, that child is going to resent it all day. If you beat an adult, he's going to remember that for years. But the dog's going to forget all about it. He's going to treat you beautifully right here, right now. So become a dog. Because dogs know how to be here now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that I would recommend is that you start behaving like a dog. Be excited that you're still alive. Be enthusiastic that everything is okay right now. I don't have to deal with any problems because all the problems are in the past
Mm-hmm.
or not yet to be.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now I'm getting it. All right. I got a little smile out of you. Wow, that's been hard to get.
Okay.
Start allowing yourself to enjoy that you're still alive.
Okay.
Because this is all you've got is this present moment. Allow it to be as good as it actually is. Everything's all right. Everything is fine.
Mm.
Gladden the mind to the point that you can receive the present moment in its fullness.
Okay.
Because this present moment is all that there is, and it's quite marvelous if you experience it. It's up to you. So start paying attention to the present moment and how marvelous it is that you're still alive here to experience this present moment.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's see you do it right now. I'll be quiet and you just sit there and experience
Okay.
being alive.
Okay. Okay. That was good.
Yeah, all right. Well, you go practice that more. Practice being satisfied with this present moment because this is all we have and it's marvelous. Accept it as it is. Pretty
Okay.
soon you begin to feel satisfied more often because you're practicing being satisfied.
Okay.
All right? So
Okay.
you go practice this for a couple of days.
I will.
Really get into it. Enjoy yourself for a while,
Okay.
being in the present moment.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll see you.
Bye.